Kiara couldn't help but feel proud of herself. Her little lemonade stand stood bright and cheerful under the warm summer sun. She had worked hard to set everything up: hand-painted signs, stacked paper cups, and a pitcher filled with the lemonade she and her mum had made that morning. Across the street, a group of kids played basketball in a driveway. They kept glancing her way, curious but unsure. One of them, a boy about her age, finally jogged over. He handed her $1 with a grin and said, "I'll take 2. Kiara smiled. "Coming right up," she replied, pouring with care. The sun climbed higher in the sky, and Kiara's cheeks began to glow pink from the heat. She opened her little notebook to check her progress. $15. She smiled to herself. She was already on her way to reaching her $50 goal for the school zoo trip. Tasha, her mum, stepped outside holding a wide-brimmed hat and placed it gently on Kiara's head. "You're doing amazing, baby," she said with pride in her voice. Kiara beamed. "Thanks, Mom. I think I'm getting better at talking to customers." But just as she handed out another cup, a low rumble echoed down the street. At first, it sounded like distant thunder. It grew louder. Kiara paused and squinted toward the sound, raising a hand to shield her eyes. Around the corner came a group of motorcycles. Their chrome glinted in the sunlight. There were at least 8 of them, each one loud, powerful, and impressive. The riders wore black leather jackets, dark helmets, and heavy boots. The basketball game stopped, and even old Mrs. Andrews peeked through her window curtain. The bikers came to a slow stop right in front of Kiara's stand. They cut their engines. The street fell into an eerie silence, except for the clinking sound of ice in her pitcher. Kiara's heart pounded. Her hands gripped the edge of the table. One of the bikers, the largest of them all, swung his leg off his motorcycle. His jacket had patches she couldn't read, and his beard was thick and grey. He lifted his helmet slowly. His face was rough, worn by time and travel, but somehow it wasn't unkind. His eyes studied her lemonade stand. "Is this where I get the best lemonade in town?" His voice rumbled like the engines that had just quieted. Kiara swallowed hard. "Yes, sir. 50 cents a cup." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled $1. "Make it 2, he said. Kiara's fingers trembled slightly as she poured the lemonade. The other bikers began to dismount. One by one, they stepped toward her stand. Their boots thumped against the pavement. Their jackets bore flames, skulls, and names she didn't know. She handed over the 2 cups as the leader took a sip. He paused, then nodded in approval. "Not bad, kid," he said. "What's your name?" She glanced at her mother, who now stood on the porch, alert and watchful. "Kiara," she said softly. "Well, Kiara," he said with a slow grin, "looks like you've just found yourself a new customer base." A tall woman with long braids stepped forward. Her jacket read, "Sherry." She pulled out a $5 bill and placed it on the table. "I'll take 10 for the crew." Kiara blinked. 10? Sherry smiled warmly. "You heard me." Kiara scrambled to pour. The mood shifted. The bikers started laughing, joking, tipping her with large bills. "Did you make this yourself?" one asked. "Yes, sir," Kiara replied proudly. "My mom helped, but it's my recipe." Another biker handed her a $20 bill for just 2 cups. The air grew lighter. Her fear melted into something new. Excitement. The bikers weren't scary. They were kind, fun, full of stories. They clinked their lemonade cups like toasts at a barbecue. Compliments flew like confetti. A younger biker crouched beside her, his eyes curious. "So, what's the lemonade fund for?" Kiara hesitated. Then she said, "I'm saving up for a school trip to the zoo." The group collectively reacted with a chorus of awes. Sherry turned to the others, lifted her helmet like a donation plate and said, "Come on, y'all, let's make sure she sees every animal in that place." Cash began to pour in, bills, coins, the sound of generosity. When Sherry handed the helmet back, Kiara looked inside and gasped. Her eyes widened. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." The leader nodded. "You earned it. Hard work deserves support." Then a burly man stepped forward. His arms were covered in tattoos. One of them, a soaring eagle stretched across his forearm. His voice was rough but soft as he said, "You remind me of my daughter." Everything stopped. His gaze was deep, distant. "She passed away a few years ago. She used to run stands just like this one." Kiara's breath caught. "I'm sorry," she said. Tasha moved closer and placed her hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Helping your daughter today," the man continued, "felt like honoring mine." Silence fell, not uncomfortable, but heavy with meaning. The leader clapped his hands. "All right," he said, smiling. "Before we all start crying, who wants seconds?" Laughter returned. The bikers stayed longer than anyone expected. When they finally left, the memory of their visit stayed behind. The next morning, Kiara's phone buzzed non-stop. Her name had spread across neighborhood pages and social media. Photos of her lemonade stand and the bikers filled the screen. People were calling her a young entrepreneur. Some called her lemonade biker approved. And by the time she stepped outside, the line had already formed. Cars lined the street. Neighbors she had never met came with change in hand. Families, kids, even elderly couples. Her best friend Mia came to help. They worked like a tiny army. Pour, smile, say thank you, repeat. The bikers returned that afternoon. This time there were more of them. Doug, the man with the eagle tattoo, handed her a box of cookies. "Amelia's recipe," he said softly. "My daughter. Thought these might go well with the lemonade." The crew helped organize the crowd, entertained kids, and handed out cups. They weren't just passing through now, they were part of it. And as cameras snapped and neighbors cheered, a man named Carlos stepped forward. "You've got something special here," he said. "What if we made this a monthly thing? Kids from all over town could set up stands. We could raise money for school programs. You'd be the inspiration." Kiara's eyes lit up. "Like a lemonade day?" she asked. Carlos nodded. "Exactly." Applause followed. By sunset, the last customer had been served. Doug approached her once more, his eyes serious, his voice soft. "You're proof that even the smallest ideas can bring people together," he said. "Keep dreaming big, Kiara." As they rode off into the distance, Kiara sat on her porch with her mom, the folded note Doug had left tucked in her lap. She opened it again. "For the brightest light on a summer's day, keep shining." She read the words over and over. "I want to donate some of the money," she told her mom, "to help kids who can't afford their school trips." Tasha nodded, her eyes filled with tears. "That's the best idea yet." The lemonade stand was gone, packed away. The yard was clean, but the market left was permanent. Kiara had set out to raise $50. What she gained was something far greater, a community, a movement, a memory, and a message that kindness, when shared, doesn't just make a difference, it changes lives. As the stars lit up the night sky, Kiara sat quietly, her hands sticky from lemonade, her heart full. She hadn't just sold drinks, she had served hope, and the world had tasted it. As the last of the bikers climbed back onto their motorcycles, the sound of engines revving once again echoed down the block. But this time, it wasn't intimidating. It wasn't loud in a scary way. It felt like something else, like applause, like celebration. The bikes had come in with a roar, and now they were leaving behind something more powerful than noise, a feeling that something important had just happened. Kiara stood beside her lemonade stand, her heart still racing, her hands trembling with awe, her wide eyes locked on the helmet now sitting heavy on the table, filled with more money than she ever dreamed of. It sparkled like treasure under the sunlight, the paper bills and loose change stacked in layers, each coin a silent testimony of kindness. Tasha chuckled softly from the porch. She stepped beside her daughter and placed a gentle hand on her back. "Well, baby," she said with a warm smile, "I think you just made more in one day than most stands do in a whole month." Kiara looked up at her mum, face glowing with joy and disbelief. "Do you think they were serious about spreading the word?" Before Tasha could answer, they heard it, the distant slam of car doors and the rising murmur of voices floating through the air. Kiara turned toward the end of the street. People were gathering, neighbors, strangers, curious onlookers, some holding their phones up, others walking with children in tow, all of them wearing expressions filled with interest and excitement. They were drawn in, like moths to a flame. Among the crowd was Mr. Harris, the owner of the nearby grocery store. There were also a few kids from the basketball court, still in their jerseys, sweaty and winded. One of them raised his hand and shouted across the street, "Yo, Kiara, what's all this about bikers at your lemonade stand?" Kiara grinned nervously, brushing a loose curl behind her ear. "They came by for lemonade," she said, "and kinda bought a lot." Tasha stepped forward and motioned toward the helmet overflowing with cash. "That's an understatement." News traveled fast in Oak Ridge Heights. Within the hour, more neighbors showed up. Some brought exact change. Others came out of pure curiosity. Cars began to line both sides of the street, turning the once quiet neighborhood into something that felt like a block party. Parents with strollers, teenagers on bikes, retired couples holding hands. Even a group of construction workers from a nearby site wandered over, hard hats still on, looking for a cold drink and a good story. Everyone wanted to know about the lemonade stand that got a visit from a biker gang. Everyone wanted to be part of the moment. And they weren't disappointed, because something about the energy felt different. It was buzzing, alive, real. People laughed in line. They chatted about the weather, the bikers, the fact that Kiara's stand had turned into the talk of the town. Some asked for photos with her. Others posted on Facebook and Instagram, tagging her location and adding captions like, "Best lemonade in town," "Biker approved," or "Support this young entrepreneur," or simply "Kiara's stand, where kindness meets cool." What had started as a quiet summer afternoon had transformed into a community event, a moment of unity, of joy, of something bigger than a cup of lemonade. Kiara worked tirelessly, her arms in constant motion as she poured drink after drink. Her best friend, Mia, had come over after hearing the buzz. She arrived with a pack of extra paper cups and a folding table, her eyes wide with disbelief as she took in the scene. "This is insane," Mia said with a laugh. "You're famous now." Together, the girls worked like a team of professionals, their rhythm natural and unspoken. One poured while the other handed over the cup. They made change. They smiled. They said thank you, and then did it again and again. The lemonade stand had become something more than a way to raise money for a zoo trip. It had become a symbol, a sign of hope, of what can happen when people show up for one another. Kids who usually stayed indoors were now outside, waving hand-painted signs that read "Fresh Lemonade" and "Help Kiara reach her goal." Strangers who normally never made eye contact were now standing shoulder to shoulder, laughing about the bikers, sipping lemonade, and trading stories about summers past. It was different now, warmer, real. Something had shifted. And then Kiara saw him. Across the street, near a tall maple tree, stood Doug, the big biker with the eagle tattoo, who had told her about his daughter. He wasn't with the others now. He wasn't laughing or joking. He stood alone, arms folded, back leaning against the tree, his eyes fixed on her. He wasn't smiling, just watching. Quiet, still, like something was weighing on his heart. Kiara nudged her mom gently. "Mom," she said, "do you think he's okay?" Tasha followed her daughter's gaze. She saw the man too, the quiet strength in his posture, the heaviness in his eyes. "Why don't you go find out, sweetheart?" she said softly. "Sometimes people just need someone to talk to." So Kiara grabbed a cup of lemonade and stepped off the curb. Her feet moved slow, her heart beat fast, but her steps were steady, sure. She crossed the street and came to stand in front of him. She held out the cup with both hands and offered a quiet smile. "Here," she said. "It's on the house." Doug blinked. His face softened. He took the cup, his fingers brushing hers. "Thanks, kid," he said, his voice low and gruff. For a moment, they just stood there, the sounds of the crowd buzzing softly behind them. Then Kiara asked, "What was your daughter's name?" Doug looked at her, the question catching him off guard. For a long moment he didn't speak. Then, with a gentle breath, he answered, "Amelia. We called her Mia. She was about your age, loved stands like this, cookies, lemonade, every weekend." Kiara smiled gently. "I bet she made really good cookies." Doug chuckled, and his eyes glistened with a layer of emotion that never quite fell. "The best," he said. "She used to say she'd open her own bakery one day, never got the chance." Kiara looked down at the little stand across the street, now surrounded by people holding drinks and talking with joy in their voices. "Do you think maybe helping me today was like helping her in a way?" she asked. Doug's eyes locked with hers. Something passed between them, not grief, not pity, something deeper, understanding. Slowly, he nodded. Yeah, I think it was." They talked for a while after that, about Amelia, about summer days, about the strange ways people show up for each other. Doug's voice cracked once or twice, but he didn't shy away, and Kiara didn't look away. She just listened, fully, like no one had in a long time. When the moment passed, Doug looked at the crowd again, then back at her. "You've got something special here, Kiara," he said. "A gift. Don't lose that." Kiara nodded. "I won't," she said. Doug placed a hand gently on her shoulder, then turned and walked back toward the others. Kiara watched him go, holding the lemonade cup a little tighter. What had started as a way to raise money for the zoo was becoming something entirely different. It was becoming a movement. By the end of the day, the crowd had tripled. Cars stretched down the street, kids danced in the grass, parents brought their own lawn chairs and sat in the shade, sipping lemonade and talking about the good this little stand had brought to their neighborhood. Tasha looked on, overwhelmed but proud. She whispered to herself, "What a day." And Kiara, standing in the middle of it all, felt something stir in her chest, a new feeling, a calling. This wasn't just about lemonade, this was about people, about healing, about showing up, about one girl with a dream and a group of strangers on motorcycles who decided to be the difference. When the sun dipped low behind the trees and the sky turned gold, Kiara stood beside her best friend, her mom, and her makeshift lemonade empire. She was tired, her hands were sticky, her feet ached. But she had never felt more alive, never felt more seen. Tomorrow would come, the buzz would grow, the story would spread. But in this moment, as laughter echoed and the air smelled of sugar and sunshine, Kiara knew something for sure. She hadn't just served lemonade today, she had poured hope into every cup, and the world had been thirsty. The next morning, Kiara woke to the persistent buzzing of her phone. It chirped, blinked, and buzzed non-stop on her nightstand, as if the world had something urgent to tell her. She rubbed her sleepy eyes and reached for it, still half dreaming of lemonade pitchers and the sound of motorcycle engines. But the second the screen lit up, the dream gave way to reality. Messages flooded in from friends, neighbors, people she didn't even know. Notifications pinged from local Facebook groups, tags, friend requests, comments, photos of her lemonade stand were everywhere, and a short video clip, one of her surrounded by bikers pouring lemonade into a smiling child's cup, had already gone semi-viral. Her name was out there, and with it, something bigger than she could yet understand. Tasha peeked into her daughter's room, already smiling as she leaned against the doorframe. "Better get ready, superstar," she said, her voice full of that warm, maternal pride. "Your stand's about to have a very busy day." Kiara shot upright, blankets tumbling down. She was wide awake now. By the time she had everything set up again, her table, the handmade sign, the freshly cut lemons stacked neatly in a bowl, the line had already started forming. It snaked down the street, neighbors and strangers alike gathering with reusable cups, curious smiles, and kids tugging at their sleeves. Cars were parked bumper to bumper along the curb. Some people brought lawn chairs, others simply stood, content to wait for a small taste of something that felt like more than just lemonade. They weren't just there for the drink, they were there to be part of the story. Mia returned, her energy as vibrant as ever, sleeves rolled up and hair tied back. "You need an assembly line," she joked, as she elbowed Kiara playfully. "Or maybe a full staff." Kiara laughed, a genuine belly laugh that bubbled out of her, even as she reached for another cup and poured. Her hands were quick but careful, her smile steady. The crowd kept coming, the line barely shrank, but she didn't feel tired, not really. Something about the energy made her feel light, lifted, like she was part of something magical. And then it happened again. A distant sound rolled through the air like thunder, slow at first, then louder, familiar. The roar of motorcycle engines echoed down the block, but this time it didn't stop hearts or raise eyebrows. This time people turned to each other and smiled knowingly. They were back, the bikers. But now there were even more of them. It looked like a parade of chrome and leather. They rode slow, steady, waving at the kids and honking softly. People clapped, a few kids cheered. One older man actually whistled as the motorcycles lined up neatly along the sidewalk. The whole scene felt surreal, like something out of a movie. Doug approached with a wide grin and a box in his arms. He looked different somehow, not just in appearance, but in presence. Softer around the edges, though no less strong. "Thought you might need a little treat to go with the drinks," he said, handing the box over. Kiara opened it and gasped. Cookies. Perfectly baked oatmeal raisin, chocolate chip, and sugar cookies shaped like stars. Each one looked homemade, and somehow sacred. "Did you guys make these?" Mia asked, awe in her voice. Doug nodded. "Amelia's recipe. Thought it was time someone else enjoyed them." Sherry stepped forward next, camera in hand, and began snapping pictures. Kiara standing proudly beside her stand, the crowd behind her, the bikers beside her, the cookies on display. "You've officially got the most famous lemonade stand in Indiana," she joked. Kiara blushed, but her eyes sparkled. The bikers didn't just stand around this time. They pitched in. One directed traffic when the cars started doubling up on the corners. Another passed out napkins and helped clean up a spilled pitcher. One even taught a group of kids how to use their fingers to make biker horns, sending the children into a fit of giggles. The street had transformed. It wasn't just about lemonade anymore. It was about laughter, about unity, about something pure and surprising. That's when Carlos, the owner of the local hardware store, stepped forward with an idea. "Kiara," he said, "what if we made this a regular thing? A monthly event? You could be the face of it. We help kids set up their own stands, raise money for good causes, support each other like we did today." Kiara's eyes widened. "Like a lemonade day?" she asked. Carlos nodded. "Exactly. You started something bigger than you know." The idea took root instantly. Cheers erupted. Neighbors nodded in agreement. Several even volunteered on the spot to help organize. Tasha stood a few steps behind her daughter, her hand over her heart, her eyes misty with emotion. Kiara's cheeks flushed with excitement, not just because of the attention, but because it felt right. Her little idea had grown into a symbol. It had become a beacon of kindness, a spark that ignited something in everyone who witnessed it. It wasn't about the money anymore. It wasn't even about the lemonade. It was about connection, about believing that small gestures matter. As the sun began to sink lower into the sky, the line finally started to shrink. The pitchers were nearly empty. The last few cookies had been given away. The buzz in the air remained, but the pace began to slow. Tasha joined Kiara on the sidewalk, bringing her a cold cup from the last batch they'd made. She handed it to her daughter and sat beside her, the two of them watching the crowd linger. "So," Tasha said with a smirk, "how does it feel to have run the most successful lemonade stand Oak Ridge Heights has ever seen?" Kiara chuckled and took a sip. The drink was sweet and tangy, but the moment was sweeter still. "It feels amazing," she said, "but not because of the money." She turned to look at the helmet sitting on the table, once again filled to the brim with bills and coins. But this time, it felt heavier in a different way, not because of its weight, but because of what it represented. I didn't know something this small could bring so many people together. Tasha nodded, her eyes glassy. That's the power of kindness, baby. When one person chooses to give, to care, others follow. That's how we grow. That's how we heal. Kiara grew quiet then. She stared at the helmet, thoughtful. Mom, she asked softly, do you think we could donate some of this? Maybe help kids who can't afford school trips or supplies? Tasha looked at her, and for a second, she didn't speak. The pride in her face said everything. I think that's the best idea you've had yet. Kiara nodded. She thought about Doug, about his daughter, about the cookies and the stories and the silence that turned into something beautiful. She thought about what it meant to be seen, not just for the lemonade or the success, but for her heart, and she wanted to pass that feeling on, to give someone else a chance to feel like they mattered, like they belonged. Later that evening, as the last of the motorcycles rode off once more, Kiara sat on her front porch steps. Her hands were in her lap. The lemonade stand had been packed away, but its presence still hung in the air. The laughter, the noise, the sense of magic that had filled every second. In her hands, she held the folded note Doug had left in the helmet the day before. She opened it slowly, read the words again. For the brightest light on a summer's day, keep shining, Doug and the crew. A tear slipped down her cheek, but it wasn't sadness. It was something deeper. Gratitude, realization. She wasn't just a little girl with a lemonade stand anymore. She was part of a ripple, part of a movement that proved hearts could change, people could come together, and something small could grow into something extraordinary. As the stars began to twinkle above the rooftops, in a sky painted with violet and gold, Kiara looked out over her quiet street. The place that had, just hours before, been filled with clapping hands, spinning bike wheels, and the smell of fresh lemonade. It was still now, but her heart was full. The legacy of this day, of this stand, of this story, it would last. She smiled softly. Not because of what she earned, but because of what she gave. And that made all the difference. If you liked this story, please like, subscribe, and share it with others so they can learn something from it too.